The thunder comes first, a crack so violent it shakes the thin walls of my apartment and sends the last working lamp flickering into darkness. I sit frozen on my second-hand couch, laptop balanced on my knees, the client project I cannot afford to lose dissolving into a black screen. The electricity dies with a soft exhale, leaving me alone with the storm and the sudden tightness spreading across my chest. I tell myself it is nothing. I tell myself it is the weather, the stress, the 3 cups of coffee I substituted for dinner because the refrigerator holds nothing but expired yogurt and hope. But the pressure builds, a fist closing around my heart, and my breath comes shorter with each attempt. Lightning illuminates the room in harsh white flashes, revealing the chaos of my existence. The stack of overdue bills on the kitchen counter, the portfolio pieces pinned to walls no client will ever see, the empty wine bottle from last Tuesday, when I celebrated losing another contract. My left arm tingles. I read somewhere that means something terrible. I read somewhere that women experience heart attacks differently than men, that we dismiss the signs, that we die alone in apartments nobody checks for days. The thought spirals into my skull and lodges there, a splinter of pure terror. I am 28 years old. I am going to die on this couch surrounded by evidence of my failures, and my sister will not find out until the smell reaches the neighbors. My phone. I need my phone. My hands shake so badly I nearly drop it twice, the screen swimming in my vision as I try to focus. Claire. I need to text Claire. We have not spoken in 7 months, not since the argument about Mom and the funeral arrangements and all the words we cannot take back. But she is the only family I have left. She is the only person who might come. The numbers blur together as I type, my fingers clumsy and cold, my chest screaming with each heartbeat. I do not check the contact. I do not verify the digits. I type what feels like the truest thing I have ever written. I think I am dying. I do not want to die alone. Please come. I send it into the void and wait for salvation or silence. The pain intensifies, radiating through my shoulder, my jaw, my spine. I slide from the couch to the floor, carpet rough against my cheek, phone clutched to my chest like a talisman. The storm rages beyond my windows, indifferent to my small crisis, indifferent to whether I survive the night. I think of all the things I meant to do. I think of all the people I meant to become. I think of Claire at 16, holding my hand at our father's funeral, promising we would always have each other. The room spins. The darkness presses closer. Somewhere in the city, my message travels toward a stranger, a wrong number, a man who will change everything. But I do not know that yet. I know only the thunder and the pain and the desperate hope that someone, anyone, will answer before the silence swallows me whole. Now please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from and what time is it. It is always fascinating to see where these stories get all around the world. Thank you. 6 hours away, the storm is a distant rumble against floor-to-ceiling windows that frame a city glittering with rain and ambition. Alexander Sinclair stands at his desk in the penthouse office he built from blood and calculated violence, reviewing documents that will determine the fate of 3 rival families and the territories they foolishly believe they control. The phone buzzes once. He ignores it. The phone buzzes again, and something about the pattern, the urgency, makes him glance at the screen. The number is unknown. The message stops his heart. I think I am dying. I do not want to die alone. Please come. For 6 seconds he cannot breathe. For 6 seconds he is 19 years old again, standing in a hospital corridor, staring at a phone that shows 3 missed calls from his younger sister Victoria. 3 calls he ignored because he was proving himself to men who are now dead by his order. 3 calls that ended with her dying alone in an alley, her final words recorded on his voicemail, a whispered plea for help that came too late. He has listened to that voicemail exactly once. He hears it every night in his dreams. Thomas Ashworth enters without knocking, files in hand. mouth already forming words about the Marchetti meeting and the importance of appearances. Alexander holds up one hand. Thomas falls silent. He knows that gesture. He knows the stillness that precedes Alexander's most dangerous decisions. "Trace this number," Alexander says, and his voice carries the particular calm that has made grown men confess their sins and beg for quick deaths. Thomas takes the phone, asks no questions, leaves the room. 4 minutes pass. 4 minutes in which Alexander stands motionless at the window, watching lightning fracture the sky, feeling the old wound tear open in his chest. Victoria would be 27 now. Victoria would have graduated from medical school. Victoria would have been something bright and good in the world if he had answered his phone, if he had come when she called, if he had been the brother she believed him to be. Thomas returns with an address, 6 hours away, a name, a face pulled from social media before the accounts went dormant. Eleanor Bennett, 28 years old, freelance graphic designer. Last post, 4 months ago, celebrating a small contract. Apartment in a building he would not house his enemies. Nobody to save her. Nobody to come. "Sir," Thomas says carefully, "the Marchetti meeting cannot be postponed. The consequences of absence will be severe." Alexander is already reaching for his coat, the one that cost more than Eleanor Bennett probably earns in a year. He does not care about the Marchettis. He does not care about territory or power or the empire he has built on the bones of better men. He cares only about the message burning in his phone, the echo of another message he failed to answer, the chance to rewrite a history that has haunted him for 15 years. He drives through the night. The rain hammers his windshield like fists against glass. The highway stretches before him, slick and treacherous, and he pushes the car faster than wisdom allows. Somewhere ahead, a stranger is waiting for someone to save her. This time, he will not be too late. This time, he will answer the call. I drift through layers of darkness, each one heavier than the last, pressing me deeper into something that feels like death, but carries the faint rhythm of my own pulse. Time loses meaning. The storm becomes a distant roar, then silence, then roar again, waves crashing against the shore of my consciousness. I dream of Claire standing over me, her face twisted with the same anger from our last conversation, telling me I always had to make everything about myself. I dream of our mother in her hospital bed, asking why neither of us came to say goodbye. I dream of nothing at all, a void so complete it should terrify me, but instead feels like relief. Then the pounding begins. At first, I think it is my heart, finally giving up its stubborn fight, but the sound comes from outside my body, from the direction of my door, violent and insistent and real. My eyes open to gray light filtering through rain-streaked windows. Morning, maybe, or afternoon. The pounding continues, and I realize someone is trying to break down my door. I should scream. I should call for help. But my phone is dead or dying somewhere beneath me, and my voice emerges as nothing more than a cracked whisper. The door splinters inward with a sound like bones breaking, and a man fills the frame, a silhouette carved from shadow and expensive tailoring. He is tall in a way that makes my small apartment seem smaller, broad-shouldered beneath a coat that probably cost more than my rent, his dark hair slicked wet against his skull, rain still dripping from him like he walked through the storm itself to reach me. His eyes find me immediately, scanning the room with a predatory efficiency that makes my blood run cold, cataloging exits and threats, and finally landing on my crumpled form against the couch. Something in his expression shifts, relief and recognition, and a desperate hunger that makes no sense because I have never seen this man before in my life. He crosses to me in 3 strides, each one purposeful, controlled, the movement of someone accustomed to navigating dangerous spaces. He drops to his knees beside me, and his hands, large and surprisingly warm, find my wrist. His fingers press against my pulse point with a gentleness that contradicts everything about his violent entrance. He counts silently, his lips moving, his dark eyes never leaving my face. I should be afraid. Every instinct screams that I should be terrified of this stranger who broke down my door, who touches me like he has the right, who looks at me with an intensity that borders on possession. But the fear that consumed me hours ago has burned itself out, leaving only exhaustion and a strange detachment. I watch his face as he assesses my condition, noting the sharp angles of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the way his brow furrows with concentration. He is beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, all edges and coiled power. He is not Claire. He is not anyone I know. And yet he came. Whoever he is, whatever mistake brought him here, he came when I called for help. The realization settles into my chest, warm and terrifying, as the stranger finally speaks. "You are alive," he says, and his voice carries an accent I cannot place. Something refined, something cold, something that cracks almost imperceptibly on the last word. "You are alive, and I am here, and you are not alone." I pull away from him, my back pressing harder against the couch, my body remembering fear, even as my mind struggles to process what is happening. "Who are you?" I demand, and my voice comes out stronger than I expect, sharp with the adrenaline that floods my system at the proximity of this stranger, this man who broke down my door and knelt before me like he had every right to be here. His expression shifts, the relief that softened his features moments ago hardening into something more guarded, more controlled. He studies me with those dark eyes, and I watch realization dawn across his face, a flicker of confusion followed by something that might be disappointment. "You do not know me," he says, "and it is not a question. I have never seen you before in my life," I respond, and the absurdity of the situation crashes over me because someone answered my message, someone came, but it was not Claire. It was not anyone I know. It was this dangerous stranger who looks at me like I am a ghost he has been chasing for years. "Wrong number," he says quietly, almost to himself, and I see his jaw tighten, his hands curl into fists at his sides. He should leave. I know this, and he knows this, and yet neither of us moves. Instead, his eyes travel over me again, clinical this time, assessing, cataloging the pallor of my skin, the sweat that has dried cold on my forehead, the trembling in my hands that I cannot seem to stop. "You need a hospital," he says, and the command in his voice leaves no room for argument. "No," I say anyway, because hospitals mean bills I cannot pay, debt collectors calling at all hours, another anchor dragging me deeper into the hole I have been drowning in for years. I do not have insurance. I do not have money. I do not have anything except this apartment and my stubborn refusal to die in it. He stares at me for a long moment, something flickering behind his eyes that I cannot read. And then he pulls a phone from his coat pocket with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to solving problems with a single call. "Catherine," he says when the line connects, and his voice carries an authority that makes my skin prickle with unease. "I need you at this address within the hour. Bring everything." He rattles off my location without consulting anything, and I realize with a chill that he already knew where I lived before he arrived, that he tracked me somehow, that this stranger has resources and reach that extend far beyond anything in my small, desperate world. "Wait," I start to protest, but he has already ended the call and risen to his feet, moving toward my kitchen with the confident stride of someone who owns every space he enters. I hear cabinets opening, the rush of water from my tap, and I want to scream at him to stop, to leave, to let me handle my own disaster as I always have. But my body refuses to cooperate, my limbs heavy and useless against the worn carpet, and all I can do is watch as this stranger takes control of my life with the same efficiency with which he broke down my door. Dr. Catherine Wentworth arrives in exactly 47 minutes, A silver-haired woman with sharp eyes and a leather medical bag that looks older than I am. She does not knock. She simply appears in my broken doorway, surveys the splintered wood with a single raised eyebrow, and steps over the debris like she has walked into stranger scenes than this. The stranger, the man who still has not given me his name, meets her with a nod that carries more communication than words. They know each other well, these two, and I watch the silent exchange between them with the detached curiosity of someone observing her own life from a great distance. Catherine kneels beside me, where I still sit against the couch, her hands cool and professional as she takes my vitals, shines a light in my eyes, asks me questions about when I last ate, when I last slept, when the chest pains began. I answer as honestly as my exhausted mind allows, and with each response I see her expression shift from concern to something closer to understanding. She pulls a blood pressure cuff from her bag, wraps it around my arm, and the silence stretches while she listens through her stethoscope. The stranger watches from across the room, his arms crossed over his chest, his face an unreadable mask, but I can feel the weight of his attention like a physical pressure against my skin. When Catherine finally sits back on her heels, her diagnosis lands like a verdict. Severe panic attack, she says, compounded by exhaustion and malnutrition. Your body reached its breaking point. She lists the warning signs I ignored for months, the skipped meals, the sleepless nights, the stress I wore like armor until it crushed me from within. Not a heart attack, she assures me, but a serious indication that something needs to change. The relief should overwhelm me, but instead I feel only humiliation, hot and sharp, flooding my cheeks with color. I thought I was dying. I sent a desperate message to a stranger. I let a man break down my door and summon a private physician to my squalid apartment, all because I could not tell the difference between mortality and my own mind betraying me. I want to disappear into the worn carpet beneath me, to sink through the floor and never face another human being again. Catherine leaves prescriptions I cannot afford and instructions I know I will not follow, and I expect the stranger to leave with her, to walk out of my shattered doorway and my life as abruptly as he entered. But when the doctor departs with a final meaningful look in his direction, he does not move. He remains standing against my wall, that predatory stillness settling over him like a second skin. I will stay until morning, he says, and his tone makes it clear this is not a request or an offer, but a statement of fact. To ensure you are stable. I should argue. I should demand he leave, call the police, assert some control over my own existence. But my body has surrendered entirely, my eyelids heavy as stones, my limbs weighted with a fatigue that goes deeper than muscle and bone. I manage only a weak protest that dies in my throat, as he moves to the chair across from me, settles into it like a guardian or a gargoyle, and watches me with those dark, unreadable eyes. I fall asleep with a stranger keeping vigil over my broken body, and I am too exhausted to be afraid. I wake at 3 a.m. to the sound of movement in my kitchen, and for one disorienting moment I forget that there is a stranger in my apartment, that my door is shattered, that my entire world shifted on its axis while I slept. Then memory floods back, and I push myself upright from where I fell asleep on the couch, my body aching in places I did not know could ache. And I follow the soft sounds of cabinet doors and running water to find him there in my tiny kitchen. He stands with his back to me, his expensive coat discarded somewhere, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows as he works with my battered kettle and the sad collection of tea bags I keep in a chipped ceramic jar. The domesticity of the image strikes me as absurd. This imposing man who broke down my door now making tea in my cramped and cluttered space like he belongs here. He does not turn when I enter, but I see his shoulders shift, an acknowledgement of my presence that tells me he knew I was there before I made a sound. I thought you might wake, he says, and his voice is different in the quiet of the night, lower somehow, stripped of the sharp command it carried earlier. I could not sleep, I admit. Though that is only partly true because I slept like the dead for hours, and now my mind refuses to quiet itself. He turns then, and I see that exhaustion has softened the harsh lines of his face, made him look almost human rather than the predator who invaded my home. He hands me a cup of tea without asking if I want it, and I wrap my cold fingers around the warmth because my hands are still trembling and I do not think they will ever stop. "What is your name?" I ask, and I realize with a start that I do not even know this basic fact about the man who has inserted himself into my crisis. "Alexander," he says and offers, "Nothing more." I wait, but he simply watches me with those dark eyes that give away nothing. I try other questions. "What do you do? Where are you from? Why does a stranger have a private doctor on call at midnight?" He deflects each one with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to guarding his secrets, turning my questions back on me, until I am the one answering, telling him about my failed graphic design career, my estranged family, my slow slide into the desperation that led to last night. Finally, frustration overwhelming my exhaustion, I ask the only question that truly matters. "Why did you come? Why did you drive 6 hours through a storm for a text message from someone you do not know?" The silence stretches between us, and I watch something shift behind his eyes, a crack in the armor he wears so carefully. "Once," he says, and his voice has changed again, rougher now, edged with something that sounds like broken glass. "I received a message like yours. From someone I loved. I was busy. I told myself I would call back later. There was always later." He pauses, and I see his hand tighten around his own cup until his knuckles go white. "She died alone," he says. Because I did not answer. The words hang in the air between us, heavy with a grief that suddenly makes sense of everything. His desperate drive through the night, his refusal to leave, his vigil while I slept. I look at this man, this Alexander with no last name and no explanations, and for the first time I see not a threat but a wound, still bleeding after years of pressure applied to keep it closed. "I am sorry," I say, and the words are inadequate, but I mean them with everything I have. He nods once, sharp, and turns away to stare out my window at the city lights below. Something has shifted between us. I do not know what it means yet, but the fear in my chest has made room for something else, something that feels dangerously like understanding. Daylight is merciless in its revelations. The gray morning sun streams through my grimy windows and illuminates every shameful detail of my existence. The stack of overdue bills on my counter arranged in order of threatening language. The refrigerator I know contains only expired condiments and half a bottle of flat soda. The furniture I rescued from curbsides and thrift stores, now showing every stain and tear under the harsh light. Alexander stands in the center of my living room, his presence even more incongruous in daylight than it was in the dark, and I watch his eyes move across my apartment with the clinical assessment of someone cataloging evidence. He sees everything. The bare walls where I sold artwork I could not afford to keep, the laptop held together with tape and desperate prayers, the single towel hanging in my bathroom because I could not justify owning two. I feel stripped naked under his observation. Every failure and compromise laid bare for this stranger who drove through the night in a coat that probably costs more than my annual income. He does not comment on any of it, but I see the knowledge settling into his expression, a understanding that cuts deeper than pity. When he finally moves toward my shattered door, I feel something that might be relief or might be loss. I cannot tell the difference anymore. He pauses at the threshold, reaches into his pocket, and produces a card that he holds out to me without ceremony. Just a phone number, nothing else, no name or title or explanation, printed on paper so thick and expensive I can feel its quality before I even touch it. "If you need anything," he says, and his voice has returned to that controlled coolness that gives nothing away. I take the card because refusing feels childish, but resentment flares hot in my chest at what it implies. I do not need charity, I tell him, and my voice comes out sharper than I intend, edged with the defensive pride of someone who has had nothing for so long that accepting help feels like surrender. He looks at me then, really looks, and something almost like respect flickers across his features before the mask returns. I protect what I invest in, he says, and the words are cold, almost cruel in their practicality. I invested 6 hours. He does not wait for my response. He steps over the wreckage of my door and disappears down the hallway, and I stand there holding his card like it might burn me, furious and confused, and something else I refuse to name. I spend the day dealing with my broken door, explaining to my indifferent landlord, accepting a temporary repair that does little to make me feel secure. It is not until evening, when I finally sit down to face the pile of bills I have been avoiding, that I find the envelope. Plain white, no writing, tucked beneath the stack as if it had always been there. Inside is a receipt from my building management. My rent, paid in full for the next 3 months. No name on the payment, but I do not need one. I stare at the paper until the numbers blur, rage and gratitude warring in my chest, until I cannot breathe around either one. I should tear up his card. I should refuse this gift that feels like ownership. Instead, I tuck both into my wallet and tell myself it means nothing at all. 2 weeks pass, and I try to convince myself that the strange night was an aberration, a fever dream born of panic and exhaustion, something to be filed away and forgotten, like so many other moments I would rather not examine too closely. I return to my routine of scrounging for freelance work and stretching every dollar until it screams. But now there is a weight in my wallet that was not there before, a card with a number I have memorized despite my best efforts to ignore it. I catch myself reaching for it at odd moments, when the loneliness presses too close, when the silence of my apartment becomes suffocating, when I wake gasping from dreams I cannot remember, but that leave me shaking. I do not call. I will not call. I refuse to become someone who needs rescuing, who depends on mysterious strangers who pay rent and break down doors and look at me with eyes that have seen too much death. Then on a Tuesday evening I come home to find my door hanging open, the lock intact but the frame splintered in a way that speaks of professional violence rather than amateur desperation. My heart stops. My breath catches. Every instinct screams at me to run, but instead I step inside because this is my home, my pathetic little kingdom, and I need to know what has been taken. The answer is nothing and everything. My meager possessions remain untouched, my television still mounted on the wall, my grandmother's ring still hidden in my sock drawer. But my laptop sits open on my desk, files scattered across the surface in a pattern that speaks of systematic searching, and I know with a cold certainty that whoever did this was not looking for valuables. They were looking for information. They were looking for something connected to me. The fear that grips me is different from the panic attack, sharper, more focused, a blade rather than a wave. Someone was in my space. Someone touched my things. Someone wanted something I do not understand, and they will come back when they do not find it. I stand in the wreckage of my sense of safety, and I think of Alexander's card, his promise that still echoes in my ears. I protect what I invest in. My hands shake as I pull out my phone. My finger hovers over the number I swore I would never dial. Then I press call and he answers on the first ring, as if he has been waiting for exactly this moment, as if he knew before I did that I would need him again. I tell him what happened in halting sentences that barely convey my terror. He listens without interruption. When I finish, there is a pause so brief I almost miss it, and then he says one word: stay. Within an hour, a black car pulls up outside my building and a man steps out, tall and stern with military bearing and eyes that assess me like a threat to be evaluated. Thomas Ashworth, he introduces himself without offering a hand, and tells me I am coming with him. I look back at my violated apartment, my broken sanctuary, and I realize I have no choice but to trust strangers who terrify me. I get in the car. The city falls away behind us as Thomas drives in silence, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror with a regularity that speaks of ingrained habit rather than specific concern. I watch the landscape change from crowded streets to sparse suburbs to rolling countryside, and with each mile I feel my old life receding like a tide that will never return. We turn onto a private road marked by nothing but a stone pillar, and then the trees part to reveal something I was not prepared to see. The estate rises from manicured grounds like a creature from another century, all gray stone and tall windows, and ivy climbing walls that have stood for generations. It is beautiful in the way that power is beautiful, imposing and untouchable, and utterly foreign to everything I have ever known. Thomas pulls the car to the front entrance where wide steps lead to massive doors, and standing at the top like a dark sentinel is Alexander Sinclair. He watches me emerge from the vehicle with an expression I cannot read, something between relief and resignation, and I climb the steps toward him on legs that feel borrowed from someone else. He does not greet me with pleasantries or false comfort. "Your apartment was not a random target," he says, and his voice carries the weight of information I am not ready to receive. "Someone tracked your phone. Someone searching for whoever you contacted that night." The words settle into my stomach like stones. "I do not understand," I manage, though understanding is already creeping through me like ice water in my veins. He gestures for me to enter the house, and I step into a foyer larger than my entire apartment, all polished floors and vaulted ceilings and art that probably costs more than I will earn in my lifetime. Alexander closes the door behind us with a sound that feels terribly final. "I have enemies," he continues, and his tone is matter-of-fact in a way that makes the statement more frightening. "People who watch my movements, who look for vulnerabilities, who would use any connection to me as leverage. When you sent that message to my private number, it was intercepted by someone monitoring my communications. They do not know who you are, but they know you matter enough that I came to you. They believe you are important to me." The blood drains from my face so quickly I have to reach for the wall to steady myself. "But I am nobody," I whisper, and the irony is so bitter I could choke on it. "I am a stranger, a wrong number, a mistake." "Yes," Alexander agrees, and something flickers in his dark eyes that might be guilt, or might be something else entirely. But they do not know that. And until they are convinced otherwise, or until the threat is eliminated, you are in danger. You are in my world now, Eleanor, whether either of us wanted it. I look at this man who should not exist in my life, this dangerous stranger who broke down my door and paid my rent, and now stands in his fortress telling me I am trapped. I have stumbled into something vast and violent and completely beyond my control, and the only person standing between me and an enemy I have never met is the very person whose existence put me at risk. I am prey in a hunt I did not know was happening, and my only shelter is the wolf himself. The suite they give me has a bedroom larger than my entire apartment, a bathroom with a tub I could swim in, and windows that overlook gardens stretching toward a tree line that might as well be the edge of the world. I stand in the center of this impossible luxury and feel like a counterfeit coin someone has accidentally dropped into a vault of gold. Alexander appears in the doorway, his presence filling the space in a way that makes the grand room feel suddenly intimate. He outlines the rules with the same clinical detachment he might use to discuss weather, though each word lands like a bar sliding into place across a prison door. I am not to leave the estate grounds. I am not to contact anyone from my previous life. I am not to trust anyone he has not personally vetted. I listen and nod, and wonder how I became someone who takes orders from a man whose full nature I still do not understand. Over the following days, I am introduced to his inner circle like a curiosity, a strange bird that has wandered into their carefully constructed ecosystem. Harriet Montague is the first, a woman perhaps a decade older than me, with steel gray hair cropped close to her skull and eyes that miss nothing. She is Alexander's head of security, and she looks at me like she is calculating exactly how much trouble I will cause and whether I am worth the effort of protecting. Be careful with him, she tells me during our first conversation alone, and I cannot tell if she means be careful because he is dangerous or be careful because he is fragile. Perhaps both. Philip Greville is easier to read on the surface, a round-faced man with an easy smile and a warmth that feels genuine until I notice the way his eyes sharpen when he thinks no one is watching. The accountant, Alexander called him, but I suspect the numbers Philip manages involve more than legitimate ledgers. He brings me tea and pastries from the kitchen and tells me stories about the estate's history that may or may not be true. He never mentions how he came to work for Alexander, but he tells me once that every person in this house owes Alexander their life in one way or another. The debt is not spoken of, he says, but it is never forgotten. I begin to understand that I have not simply entered a house, but a kingdom with its own laws and hierarchies and unspoken codes. Alexander sits at its center like a dark star, around which everything else orbits, and I am caught in his gravity whether I choose to be or not. At night I lie in my luxurious bed and stare at the ceiling and wonder what kind of man inspires such loyalty and such fear in equal measure. I wonder what he sees when he looks at me, this accidental intruder into his carefully controlled world. I wonder if I will ever stop feeling like I am standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to discover whether I will fly or fall. He summons me to his study on the fourth day, and I know before I cross the threshold that whatever he is about to tell me will change the shape of my fear. The room is all dark wood and leather and books that look like they have been read rather than displayed, and Alexander stands behind his desk with a file open before him, photographs spread across the polished surface like cards in a game I do not know how to play. Richard Ashford, he says, and the name falls from his lips like a curse. He slides a photograph toward me and I see a man perhaps a decade older than Alexander, silver threaded through dark hair, a smile that does not reach his pale eyes. He looks like someone's wealthy uncle, like a man who donates to charities and attends galas, and that ordinariness makes Alexander's next words all the more chilling. He runs the Ashford Syndicate, Alexander continues, and we have been at war in all but name for 3 years. He has been searching for weaknesses in my organization, pressure points, anyone close to me who could be used as leverage. When you sent that message to my private line, his people intercepted it. They do not know your name yet, but they know you exist. They know I came to you. And Richard Ashford is a man who believes sentiment is a weakness to be exploited. I stare at the photograph of this stranger who has decided I am valuable, and the irony rises in my throat like bile. I am nobody, I say, and I hear the echo of my own words from days ago, the same desperate protest against a reality that refuses to bend to logic. I am a wrong number, a mistake. Surely he knows that by now. Alexander's jaw tightens. What he knows is that I drove 6 hours through a storm for you. What he knows is that you are now living in my home under my protection. In his world, in our world, that means something. It does not matter that you are a stranger. It matters that I am behaving as though you are not. He closes the file with a snap that sounds like a door slamming. I will end this threat, he says. And the promise in his voice is cold and absolute. Ashford has overreached. He has made assumptions that will cost him. But until I can act, until I can ensure your safety permanently, you remain here. I want to argue. I want to rage against the unfairness of being caught in a war I never enlisted in, of becoming a pawn in a game played by men who see people as pieces to be sacrificed. But when I look at Alexander, really look at him, I see the same trapped tension in the set of his shoulders, the same caged frustration in the depths of his dark eyes. He did not choose this either, this complication I have become. We are both prisoners now, bound by a single mistyped digit, and the violence it has unleashed. The walls of his beautiful fortress press closer, and I wonder which of us feels more suffocated by the protection he is compelled to provide. Days pass in the gilded prison, and something shifts between us so gradually that I cannot pinpoint when distrust becomes tolerance, becomes something I am afraid to name. We fall into a routine without ever agreeing to one. Breakfast in the sunlit morning room where he reads reports, and I sketch on the tablet Harriet procured for me. Our silence is no longer weighted with suspicion, but with a strange companionship. Dinners in the formal dining room that he insists upon, though we sit at the same corner of the massive table rather than at opposite ends, close enough that I can see the way candlelight softens the sharp angles of his face. I discover his library on the sixth day, a vast room lined floor to ceiling, with books that smell of leather and age and secrets, and I find him there late one evening with Chopin playing softly from hidden speakers and a tumbler of amber liquid cradled in his elegant hands. He does not ask me to leave. I curl into a chair across from him, and we exist in parallel, two people pretending they are not acutely aware of every breath the other takes. I learn that he feeds the stray cats that have claimed the estate grounds as their territory, that he leaves dishes of food at the garden's edge each morning with a tenderness that seems impossible in a man capable of the violence I know lives beneath his surface. He learns that I sketch compulsively when I am anxious, that I refuse to accept help I have not earned, that my pride is a fortress I have built brick by brick against a world that has offered me little else to stand on. One evening, he appears in the small study I have claimed as my workspace and places a folder before me. Inside are briefs for 3 businesses I recognize as legitimate fronts for his empire: a restaurant chain, a security firm, a real estate development company. They need rebranding, he says, his voice carefully neutral. New logos, marketing materials, a complete visual identity overhaul. I would hire an outside firm, but I find myself preferring to keep such matters internal. The payment terms are outlined on the final page. I stare at the folder and then at him, searching for pity in his expression and finding none. This is not charity, I say slowly, and it comes out more question than statement. This is a commission. He inclines his head, the barest acknowledgement. You have skills I require. I have resources you need. It seems an equitable arrangement. Something cracks in my chest, some wall I did not realize I had been reinforcing with every act of kindness he has shown me. He is not offering me money to ease his conscience. He is offering me work, purpose, a reason to be here beyond my own helplessness. He is seeing me not as a burden to be managed, but as a person with value to contribute. I accept, I tell him, and my voice is steadier than I expect. Good, he says, and for the first time since I have known him, I see something that might be the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. I find myself wanting to see it again. The alarm shatters my sleep like glass breaking, a sound so sharp and wrong that for a moment I am back in my apartment with my chest seizing and the world ending around me. Then the second sound registers. Gunfire. Distant but unmistakable. The staccato rhythm of violence I have only ever heard in movies, but recognize now with a visceral certainty that turns my blood to ice. I am on my feet before I fully understand what is happening, my body moving on instinct while my mind struggles to catch up. The hallway outside my suite is dark, the power cut, and I can hear shouting from somewhere below, the thunder of footsteps, more shots. My hand is on the doorknob when it flies open, and Alexander fills the frame, and the man standing before me is not the one I have come to know over quiet dinners and long silences. This Alexander is something else entirely, something cold and lethal, a weapon given human form. He holds a gun with the casual familiarity of a man who has held one 1,000 times, and his dark eyes scan me once, assessing, cataloging, before his free hand closes around mine with a grip that borders on painful. We move through the darkened house like ghosts, his body angled to shield mine at every corner, every doorway, every stretch of exposed hallway. I want to ask what is happening, but the answer is obvious, and the words would only slow us down. Ashford. The name pulses through my mind like a heartbeat, a drumbeat, a death knell. He has come for me, for the weakness Alexander never should have shown, for the wrong number that has become a weapon pointed at both our hearts. We descend stairs I did not know existed, through a door hidden behind a bookcase that would seem absurd if I were not so terrified, into a corridor that smells of concrete and earth and fear. The safe room is a bunker, reinforced steel and multiple locks and screens showing feeds from cameras I cannot make sense of in my panic. Alexander seals the door behind us, and for a moment there is only darkness, only the sound of our breathing, only the distant muffled chaos of a battle being fought above our heads. Then the emergency lights flicker on, casting everything in a red glow that makes him look like something from a nightmare, and I realize we are pressed together in the narrow space, his chest against my back, his arms still around me, as if he cannot bear to let go. I can feel his heart racing. The rhythm is fast, too fast, a drumbeat of terror that matches my own. This man who commands an empire, who speaks of death with the same casual tone others use for weather, who has shown me nothing but iron control since the moment he broke down my door, is afraid. Not for himself. The realization hits me with the force of a physical blow. His fear is for me. I feel it in the way he holds me tighter when another burst of gunfire sounds above us, in the way his breath catches when I flinch, in the way his hand spreads across my stomach as if he could physically hold me together. Something fundamental shifts in my chest, some final wall crumbling under the weight of this truth I can no longer deny. The all clear comes at dawn, a single tone through the estate's speakers that means the threat has passed, but nothing will ever feel the same. Alexander leads me from the safe room in silence, his hand still wrapped around mine, as if releasing me would cause him physical pain, and I watch the transformation happen in reverse as we climb back through the hidden passages into the house above. The cold, lethal creature who shielded me through the night retreats behind his eyes, replaced by something worse. Guilt, heavy and suffocating, settling over his features like a shroud. I see the damage as we emerge into the main hall, bullet holes in the plaster, a shattered window, blood on the marble floor that someone is already working to clean. 3 of his people were injured, Harriet tells him in clipped tones. None dead. Ashford's men retreated after breaching the outer perimeter, a show of force rather than a genuine attempt to take the estate. A message, a promise of worse to come. Alexander nods once and releases my hand, and the absence of his touch feels like a wound opening. He disappears into his study and does not emerge for the rest of the day. I wait. I pace my rooms. I work on the branding project he commissioned with hands that tremble slightly over the tablet screen. I eat dinner alone in the morning room where we used to share breakfast, and the empty chair across from me feels like an accusation. By nightfall, I cannot bear it anymore. I find him where I knew I would, in the study with the lights low and a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk, staring at nothing with eyes that see ghosts I cannot name. He does not look up when I enter. Eleanor, he says, and my name in his mouth sounds like an apology and a farewell. You should not be here. I should never have let you stay this long. I should have sent you away the moment I knew what finding you would cost. The words are fuel to a fire I did not know was burning. I cross the room in strides that feel too short, too slow, and plant myself before his desk, with my hands flat on its surface and my heart pounding against my ribs. Stop, I tell him, and my voice is harder than I have ever heard it. Stop treating me like a burden you have to carry. Stop acting like I am a mistake you need to correct. I chose to call you. I chose to stay. Every day I have been here, I have chosen this, chosen you, and you do not get to make that choice worthless by drowning in guilt I never asked you to feel. He looks at me then, truly looks, and I see the cracks in his armor spreading. You do not understand, he says quietly. Everyone I have ever let close, everyone I have ever tried to protect, they end up bleeding for it. My sister, my parents, partners and friends, and people who trusted me to keep them safe. I am not a shelter, Eleanor. I am a storm. Then let me stand in it, I hear myself say, and the truth of the words resonates through every hollow space inside me. I am not afraid of your world anymore. I have seen it. I have survived it. What terrifies me is the thought of leaving it. Of leaving you. The confession hangs between us like a held breath. Alexander rises slowly, rounds the desk with deliberate steps that close the distance between us inch by agonizing inch. When he reaches me, his hands come up to cup my face with a tenderness that breaks something open in my chest, and he studies me like I am the most dangerous thing he has ever faced, the one threat he has no defense against. He kisses me and the world falls away. His mouth claims mine with a hunger that speaks of weeks of restraint, of every loaded glance and accidental touch and careful distance finally shattering under the weight of what neither of us could keep denying. I taste whiskey and desperation and something darker, something that feels like surrender, and my hands find the fabric of his shirt and twist into fists because I need something to anchor me against the current threatening to sweep me under. His fingers thread through my hair, tilt my head back, and he kisses me deeper, harder, like a man trying to memorize something he knows he cannot keep. I burn everywhere he touches. I burn everywhere he does not. Then he pulls back, and the absence of his mouth is a violence all its own. Eleanor. My name is a ragged sound, torn from somewhere deep in his chest, and when I open my eyes, I see the war playing out across his features. Want and fear and something that looks horribly like grief. You do not know what you are choosing, he says, and his voice has the quality of broken glass, sharp edges hidden beneath a careful surface. My life is blood and betrayal. Everyone I have loved has paid for it. My sister, my parents, friends who trusted me to keep them safe. I am not a man who gets to have this. I am not a man who gets to have you. I reach for him, but he steps back, and the distance he puts between us feels like miles, like oceans, like the cold space between stars. Alexander, I start, but he shakes his head, and the motion is final, absolute, a door closing that I do not know how to open. I will not let you become another ghost I carry, he says quietly. I will not let you become another name I whisper in the dark, another face I see when I close my eyes, another grave I visit when the weight becomes too much to bear. You deserve a life, Eleanor, a real life, with someone who can give you safety and peace and all the ordinary things I burned away from myself years ago. He leaves. He walks out of his own study and leaves me standing there with my lips still tingling and my heart cracking along fault lines I did not know existed, and I want to scream, want to chase him, want to shake him until he understands that safety means nothing if it comes without him. But I do not move. I stand in the low light with his whiskey still untouched on the desk, and I finally understand what I am fighting against. His distance is not rejection. His retreat is not cruelty. It is terror, pure and absolute, the terror of a man who has watched everyone he loves bleed out because of what he is and who he chose to become. He is not protecting me from his enemies. He is protecting me from the curse he believes himself to be, from the poison he thinks runs through his veins, from the death he is convinced follows in his wake, and I know then that I will have to be the brave one. I will have to fight for both of us. I give him 2 days to come to me. He does not. I watch him move through the estate like a ghost in his own home, present at meals, but absent in every way that matters, his eyes sliding past me as if looking directly would shatter whatever fragile control he has rebuilt around himself. By the 3rd morning, I am done waiting. I am done being the damsel in the tower while the dragon fights battles on my behalf. done being a problem to be solved rather than a person with agency and skill and a desperate need to matter in my own survival. I find Harriet in the security hub, a room filled with monitors and equipment I cannot begin to name, and I plant myself in front of her desk with my shoulders squared and my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. I want to help, I tell her. I want to do something useful, something real, something that ends this threat instead of just hiding from it. She looks at me with those sharp, assessing eyes that miss nothing, and I see her initial dismissal shift into something like curiosity. "What exactly do you think you can offer?" she asks, and there is no cruelty in the question, only genuine inquiry. I tell her about my work. Really tell her, not just the surface description of logos and branding, but the technical skills beneath. I can manipulate images pixel by pixel until they tell whatever story I need them to tell. I can forge documents that would fool anyone without specialized equipment. I can create digital trails that lead nowhere or everywhere, false breadcrumbs scattered across the network to confuse and misdirect. By the time I finish, Harriet is leaning forward, interest sharpening her features, and she begins to explain what they actually need: false identities to infiltrate Ashford's organization, manipulated photographs placing his lieutenants in compromising positions, financial documents that could expose his legitimate fronts to investigation. I work for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, eating only when Harriet forces sustenance into my hands. The work is meticulous and exhausting and exactly what I needed, a way to channel every frustrated emotion into something productive, something that proves I am more than a burden to be protected. On the fourth day, Alexander finds out. I hear him before I see him, his voice echoing through the security hub with a cold fury that makes every person in the room freeze. Harriet tries to intervene, but he cuts through her explanations like a blade through silk, and then he is standing before me, with his eyes blazing and his jaw clenched so tight I can see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "You had no right," he says, and the words are ice and fire simultaneously, controlled devastation in every syllable. "This is not your fight. This is not your world. I brought you here to keep you safe, not to turn you into a weapon." I rise from my workstation and face him without flinching. "You do not get to decide what I do with my own skills," I tell him. "You do not get to lock me away and fight my battles alone, just because you are afraid of what might happen if you let me stand beside you. I am already in this, Alexander. I have been in this since the moment I sent that message to the wrong number. The only choice now is whether I face it as a prisoner or as a partner." The silence between us crackles with tension. His fury does not diminish, but something else rises alongside it, something that looks terrifyingly like respect. The plan takes shape over 3 days of tense meetings in the war room, a space I never knew existed until Harriet granted me access. And with each iteration of the strategy, I watch Alexander's jaw clench tighter, his objections growing more desperate even as the logic becomes undeniable. "We need to draw Ashford out," Thomas argues, his voice calm and measured in a way that suggests he has made these calculations before, weighed lives against outcomes, and accepted the mathematics of violence. He is too well protected in his own territory. We need neutral ground, a vulnerability he cannot resist exploiting. "And Eleanor is that vulnerability," Alexander says flatly, "and the way he speaks my name carries the weight of everything he cannot say in front of his lieutenants, every fear and every feeling he has tried so hard to bury. She is the perceived weakness he has been hunting. If we dangle her in front of him, he will come. And if something goes wrong, she dies." The room falls silent. I feel the eyes on me, measuring, assessing, waiting to see if I will crumble under the reality of what is being proposed. I do not. I have had 3 days to make peace with this, 3 days to understand that my involvement is not just useful, but necessary, that my face is the only bait Ashford will believe. "He thinks I matter to you," I say quietly, and I watch Alexander flinch at the words. He thinks I am your weakness. So let him believe it. Let him come for me thinking he has won, and then show him exactly how wrong he is. The argument continues for hours. Alexander presents alternative after alternative, each one dismantled by the practical realities Thomas and Harriet lay before him. Finally, when the night has grown old and the others have retreated to give us privacy, I cross to where he stands by the window, his reflection ghost-like against the darkness beyond. "Do you trust me?" I ask. And the question is simple, but the answer it demands is not. He turns to face me, and I see the war in his eyes, the desperate desire to lock me away somewhere Ashford can never reach, fighting against the knowledge that such a place does not exist, that the only path forward runs directly through the danger he wants to shield me from. "I trust you," he says finally, and the words sound like they cost him something vital. "I do not trust the world to be kind to you. I do not trust fate to spare what I cannot bear to lose. But I trust you, Eleanor. God help me. I trust you more than I have trusted anyone in years. Then let me do this," I tell him. "Let me fight beside you instead of behind you." He closes his eyes, and when he opens them again, the decision has been made. "You will wear a tracker sewn into your clothing," he says, his voice shifting into the clinical tone of a man planning an operation. "You will carry a weapon, and you will know how to use it before we move. And if anything goes wrong, if Ashford gets the upper hand, you will run. You will leave me behind, and you will run, and you will never look back." "I agree to the first two conditions," I tell him. "The third is not something I can promise." His expression cracks, just slightly, just enough to show me the terrified man beneath the commander. And I know that whatever comes next, we will face it together. The warehouse is cold and empty, and smells of rust and old machinery, a neutral ground chosen precisely because it belongs to no one, a graveyard of industry where empires come to negotiate or to die. I stand in the center of the vast space with my arms wrapped around myself, playing the part of the frightened woman Ashford expects to find, and the terror I project is not entirely performance, because somewhere beyond these walls, Alexander waits with his forces, and if anything goes wrong in the next few minutes, I will never see him again. The tracker sewn into the lining of my jacket pulses against my ribs like a second heartbeat, a reminder that I am not truly alone, even as the shadows stretch around me and the silence presses down like a physical weight. I hear him before I see him, footsteps echoing across the concrete floor with the measured confidence of a man who believes he has already won. And when Richard Ashford emerges from the darkness, he is exactly what I expected, and somehow worse. Expensive suit, silver hair, smile that never reaches his pale, calculating eyes. He looks at me the way a collector examines a new acquisition, something to be possessed and displayed, and ultimately discarded when its usefulness ends. "So this is what brought the great Alexander Sinclair to his knees," he says, circling me slowly, and I force myself to shrink back, to let my voice tremble when I beg him to let me go. He laughs, a sound like breaking glass. "You do not understand your own value," he continues, his tone almost pitying. "Sinclair has built his reputation on being untouchable, unreachable, immune to the weaknesses that destroy lesser men. And then you stumble into his life with your wrong number and your desperate plea, and suddenly he has something to lose." He stops circling, stands before me close enough that I can smell his cologne, something expensive masking something rotten beneath. "I am going to enjoy watching him choose," Ashford says softly. "His empire or his woman, his legacy or his heart. It is a choice that always ends the same way, you know. They always choose power, and then they spend the rest of their lives regretting it." I see the signal then, a flash of light through the grimy windows, and chaos erupts around us. The doors crash open, gunfire splits the air. Ashford moves faster than I expected, his hand closing around my throat as he drags me backward, using my body as a shield against the forces pouring into the warehouse. I cannot breathe, Cannot think, can only feel the cold press of a gun barrel against my temple and Ashford's voice screaming threats into the sudden silence. And then Harriet's training takes over, muscle memory bypassing conscious thought. I twist into his grip instead of away, drive my elbow into his solar plexus, stamp down on his instep with every ounce of strength I possess. His hold loosens for just a second, and I wrench myself free, dropping to the ground as a single shot cracks through the air above me. Ashford falls. Alexander stands 20 feet away, weapons still raised, his eyes finding mine across the chaos. It is over. The aftermath is chaos and silence simultaneously. The warehouse filled with the acrid smell of gunfire and the sounds of Alexander's people securing the perimeter, checking bodies, calling in cleanup crews who will make this night disappear from every record and every memory, except the ones that matter. I remain on the cold concrete floor for what feels like hours, but is probably only seconds, my body trembling with the adrenaline crash, my throat burning where Ashford's fingers left their mark. Then Alexander is there, kneeling beside me, his hands running over my arms and shoulders and face, with a desperation that contradicts every controlled gesture I have ever seen from him. He does not speak. He does not need to. His eyes say everything as they catalog each bruise, each scrape, each evidence of how close he came to losing something he has only just allowed himself to want. Thomas appears at his shoulder, murmuring about extraction and timelines and the dozen practical concerns that follow violence, but Alexander waves him away without looking, his entire focus narrowed to the woman shaking in his arms. Later, in the car speeding back toward the estate, he finally finds words. "It is over," he says, and his voice carries a weight I do not immediately understand. Ashford is dead. His organization will fracture. The threat to you is eliminated. I wait, sensing there is more. "You can go home now," he continues, and each word sounds like it costs him blood. "Back to your apartment, your life, your work. I will ensure you have protection for as long as necessary, money to rebuild, anything you need." He pauses, staring straight ahead at the road unwinding before us. "I will disappear from your existence as completely as I entered it." The offer hangs between us like a door swinging open onto a path I no longer recognize as mine. I think of my apartment with its thin walls and overdue bills, the life I lived before a wrong number changed everything. I think of the woman I was, exhausted and alone, and so certain she was dying that she reached out to a sister who had stopped answering years ago. And I think of who I have become in these weeks, someone who forged documents and faced down a monster and discovered strength she never knew she possessed. Someone who fell in love with a dangerous man in a dangerous world and found herself more alive than she had ever been in safety. I reach across the space between us and take his face in my hands, turning him to look at me the way he once turned me in his study, the night he kissed me and then retreated in terror. "I do not want to be safe," I tell him, and I watch his expression crack open like ice breaking in spring. "I do not want protection or money or distance. I want you, Alexander. I want your world and your people and your impossible life. I want to wake up beside you and fight beside you and build something with you that neither of us ever thought we could have." His control shatters then, completely and beautifully, and when he kisses me, it tastes like surrender and salvation and the beginning of everything we were both too afraid to choose. The library smells of leather and old paper, and the particular warmth of afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows, and I stand before the drafting table Alexander had installed for me 3 months ago, reviewing the final designs for Sinclair Holdings' newest legitimate venture, a chain of art galleries that will launder nothing and hide nothing, and exist purely because he wanted to build something clean with me. 6 months have passed since a wrong number rewrote the trajectory of my existence, since a desperate message sent into the void was answered by a man who should have been a stranger and became instead the axis around which my entire world now turns. The estate, that once felt like a gilded prison has transformed into something I never thought I would have again, a home, its halls filled with people who have become family in all the ways that matter. Harriet still terrifies the new security recruits, but saves her rare smiles for me. Thomas has stopped calling me Miss Bennet and started calling me Eleanor, a small shift that signals an acceptance I treasure. Philip teaches me to read financial documents over tea and scones, preparing me for a role I never anticipated but have grown to embrace. And the stray cats Alexander feeds have multiplied, a small colony of rescued creatures who seem to understand that this is a place where broken things are made whole. I hear his footsteps before I see him, the familiar rhythm I could identify anywhere now, and when Alexander enters the library, the exhaustion is written in every line of his body. The negotiations with the families who once feared Ashford's alliance have been brutal. Long days of posturing and power plays and careful diplomacy that drains him in ways violence never did. But his eyes find me immediately, tracking across the room to where I stand in a pool of golden light, and something in his expression eases like a knot finally releasing. He crosses to me without speaking, wraps his arms around me from behind, presses his face into my hair, and simply breathes. I lean back into his strength, into the solid warmth of him, and, for a long moment, we exist in silence together, two people who found each other through impossible chance and chose to stay through deliberate will. Do you ever regret it? I ask finally, and I feel his arms tighten around me, answering that text from an unknown number in the middle of the night, driving 6 hours for a stranger who was not even dying. He turns me in his arms, tilts my face up to his, and his dark eyes hold mine with an intensity that still steals my breath after all these months. It was the first right thing I had done in years, he says quietly. Every choice before that was strategy or survival or vengeance. You were the first thing I chose simply because something in me recognized something in you. I think of my original message, those desperate words typed with trembling fingers in a dark apartment while I was certain my heart was failing. I think I am dying, I whisper. I do not want to die alone. Alexander presses his forehead to mine, his hands cradling my face like I am something precious beyond measure. Neither do I, he answers, and now neither of us will.